Hello everyone and welcome to tonight's Rugby Canada Law Implementation Guide webinar series. Tonight's focus will be on the 2017 World Rugby Global Law Trials, which came into effect in Canada as of January 1st of this year. I will be recording this webinar as well as the Q&A session that will be happening afterwards, and it will be posted on Rugby Canada's communication channels in order for people to be able to review afterwards. So we'll get right into it. Purpose of tonight will be to try and understand the basics of our key area of focus, which obviously is our World Rugby Global Law Trials. We'll look at trying to understand the differences between community rugby and professional rugby in the video examples. We'll examine how we implement the global law trials at the community level and how we can work to ensure player welfare is our primary concern. Yesterday's webinar on measures to limit contact to the head is obviously more directly related to our concern around player welfare. However, with some of these law trials, obviously player welfare plays into some of these decisions, and we'll get into what that looks like in a moment. So here we go. So what I've done is outlined the key points in law. I have not written here the law as they are written in the law book, and the reason for that is they are quite long in some areas. So some of the video that we will see has those laws written in, and you will be able to go back and take a look. As well, they are already posted on Rugby Canada's YouTube channel. So our first point is that all uncontested scrums must have 8 players. I do not have a video example of this. However, it's pretty straightforward that each team in an uncontested scrum must have 8 players. At the under 19 level, in contested scrums, we need to have the same amount of players. At the senior level in contested scrums, we can have one team with more players than another. However, in uncontested scrums, we must move to 8 players. So in some cases, it might mean a back having to come and fill in. Further point, teams now have the option to kick to touch on a penalty awarded after time expires. We will see what that looks like. Teams can also choose the most advantageous penalty if there are more than one infringement during a phase of play. We will also take a look at what that looks like. And there's no longer a conversion on a penalty try. This is another one I don't have video for. However, I think that one is pretty straightforward. I would also encourage officials to allow the team that scored the penalty try to come back and get set up and not allow the team that got scored on to run up to take a quick kickoff. The reason for that is we don't want to disadvantage one team or another. Furthermore, if the penalty try is awarded at any point before the 40 minutes or 35 or 30 depending on the level of game for the first half, or before the 80 minutes or less depending on the level of game as well for full time, then we will have a kickoff regardless, so just keep that in mind. And there's a link to the World Rugby news article regarding the implementation of the law trials. So 2 more key points here directly related to Law 19, touch and line out. The touch law has been revised to have the plane of touch as the primary marker for when the ball has left the field of play, and in all cases where a player is attempting to reach over the plane of touch to keep the ball in the field of play, that player must first start in the field of play. And what we'll do is we'll play the video clips that we have. There is a lot around Law 19, so I'll let those speak for themselves and then we'll answer questions about it following that. So here's our first video example in relation to a penalty be awarded after time has expired. So these videos were provided by World Rugby without the writing on them. What I've done is added the law as it's written for the specific law trial in some of these examples. I apologize for a bit of the lag on the video here. I've tried to address it in a few different ways on this presentation. However, I am struggling at the moment with it. But this video is also available on Rugby Canada's YouTube page under the playlist for the 2017 Law Implementation Guide. So the purpose behind this particular change is to allow for play to continue here on a penalty, provided that the kick is taken directly into touch. The reason for this is because it just allows for the game to continue as it would otherwise if a team was to, let's say, for example, select a scrum off a penalty as well. So the other significance of this particular change is that it can certainly affect outcomes of matches or outcomes of point differentials when it comes to standings and competitions that have bonus points for try scored and or losses of less than 5 points. So things for officials to keep in mind. Furthermore, we don't see it in this particular video. However, if there was to be another penalty awarded at this point, the same would apply. Just be aware of that. If the attacking team here, which ends up scoring a try, if they were the team that was ahead and wanted to end the game on the penalty, they would first have to quick tap the ball into play and then kick the ball into touch after that in order to end the game. All right. So here we'll have a video example of the ability for teams to select a penalty that is most advantageous to them. I believe this video will cut out before we actually see the selection being made. So what I'm going to do is walk us through it. Following the quick tap here by green, there is an advantage being played for white not being 10 on the penalty, and we'll see the referee make that signal here, advantage for not 10. And at this next breakdown, we will see white go off their feet at this part, and the referee play advantage and subsequently blow the whistle. So unfortunately, because of the video lag, and I've again tried to address it and haven't been able to, but the referee does offer the captain for green the opportunity to select the penalty marker back where the quick tap was taken for the not 10, or here in this moment for the white team being off their feet. Just something to be aware of for officials. And again, I don't have a video example of the no conversion on the penalty try, but just be aware of what was discussed earlier. So we'll get into Law 19, touch and line out, and I have 3 examples here before we get to the clarification in law, which then has this concept applied to other parts of the field. So what we'll do is we'll watch these, and then that'll leave us time to discuss at the end. So again, here's the law as it's written in regards to touch and line out for the law trial. So this video shows a previous example where whereas at the time the decision would have been that the player, because they played the ball across the plane of touch, that play would have been dead and the ball in touch by the team that kicked it. That play is now allowed to continue, as was written in that little passage there. Okay, and the reason is because that player, in fact, I think I'm going to play this one again as it is significant, because the player who played the ball back into the field of play started in the field of play first. And so because they started in the field of play and played the ball backwards before it landed into touch, just here, play should be allowed to continue now. This is new. Right, so now we'll get into some examples of what we had seen previously in terms of players being in touch, retrieving the ball. Here's a couple of kickoff examples. Again, I apologize for the lag. I've taken a few cracks at it. But we will see a replay here with an explanation as to what the decision would be. So we'll see here off the kickoff, the player retrieving the ball, catches the ball after it had crossed the plane of touch. Therefore, the team that kicked it out is the one who kicked it into touch. So the option here is for a scrum, line out, or re-kick to the white team. Okay, and we'll take a look at another example here. This one looks like it's going to play all right. So it used to be that because this player had a foot in touch, that the ball was caught in touch, and the team that kicked it brought it into touch. However, now, because this player caught the ball prior to it crossing the plane of touch, and as we see here, that the blue team is now the team that brought the ball into touch. Therefore, we would have a line out for white where the ball was caught. All right. So what this brought about was a clarification in law that the touch law would apply to, or the idea of the plane of touch would apply to the goal line, the dead ball line, and I've since received word that it also applies to the 22-meter line. Unfortunately, I've yet to be able to come across video examples of how this would impact decisions on the 22-meter line. However, once we take a look at these in-goal examples, we can have a Q&A session on the 22-meter line if people need more clarification. So the key points are that, again, touch law applies to the dead ball line and the touch and goal line, as well as the goal line itself. And similarly, it also applies to the 22-meter line. So again, we'll run through some examples and we'll see why some of this is very important. Here's our first example around the goal line. And again, we've seen this tactic in the past where a player will put their foot across the line, and therefore, as the ball was still rolling, it would have been brought in by the kicking team. As of January 1st, this decision is now a 5-meter scrum, as the team in yellow brought the ball into their in goal as they played it before it crossed the plane of touch. Excellent. Here is a video of the ball crossing the dead ball line. This is the same as it's always been, just a reminder that if the ball itself crosses over the plane of the dead ball line or the touch and goal, touch and goal line, that there is this option for the non-offending team here to have a 22-meter drop or a scrum from where the ball was kicked. As you can see, they're all moving up to where the ball was kicked. Okay, here's another example around the dead ball line. And we'll get a good shot of this on the replay as well. But note that the player plays the ball before it crosses the dead ball line. So whereas it used to be that blue made it dead and the scrum option was available, in this case now the red team is the one who's played the ball prior to it crossing the dead ball line. Therefore, they are the ones who have made it dead, and the only option here is a 22-meter dropout for red. It's still a 22 drop as blue kicked it into the in goal, but red is the team that made it dead. Okay, and then our last example is just be aware, officials, of what can possibly happen depending on skill sets of players. However, so in the old law, because the player played the ball after it crossed the plane, the ball would have been dead. However, now, because this player starts in the field of play, i.e. in the in goal, and plays the ball prior to him landing outside of the field of play, the ball remains alive, and we would have had a try with the next blue player coming to touch the ball down. All right. So, what does this mean for us at the community level of the game? Well, what I've done is taken some examples of America's Rugby Championship games from this past weekend and used them as there is no TMO. So although there are ARs, we still have a couple of things we can look at to work with. It's also the most recent example and some key video I can cue in on. So there's a couple of points here we want to take into account for assistant referees, mainly their positioning, right? So one of the keys is to put yourself in a good position to see the ball cross the plane of touch. Furthermore, try and remain stationary as much as possible. So in our first example here, and I will walk through it as we go. We'll see that the AR, after setting the 10-meter line, has moved already deeper to where the ball might cross. And then as the kick is being taken and they are taking a look, we'll see here that the AR remains stationary so that their head is not moving, and they're able to take a good look at where the player started. It's excellent work by the assistant referee in that instance. Here, unfortunately, the video is not great, but we'll see the AR come late as they would remain stationary to make sure that they got a good sight line, and they were probably in a better position to see that the player probably started in touch prior to jumping, at which point the ball would be dead and it would have been taken out by red. So again, excellent work by the assistant referees in terms of their positioning here. Bit of guidance for the actual referee now, where you're dealing with situations with no assistant referees and only touch judges from your local, from the two clubs involved in the match. So the first one is you want to try and remain clear of bodies now, as they might need some help, right? Good thing to try and remember as a referee is that the touch law is now the same as basketball, basically, where you need to know where the player starts before reaching for the ball and if the ball is thrown back before they land. So again, we'll walk through some of this in this particular video example. And we'll see here the freeze frame with the circle. Players are obviously now aware in BC of this new trial, and they are positioning themselves accordingly. Here we'll see several bodies in the way of the referee as he is moving towards the touchline. If after giving the mark he had moved to the touchline, he might have had a much clearer view. I'm not saying that this is the option at all times. However, what I am saying is that what we are able to see here is that there are some clear sight lines that might be able to help us when we try and help out our touch judges who might not be fully aware of exactly how this all works. Okay. So a couple of other points to keep in mind. The decisions at the goal line are probably the most crucial in terms of the goal line, dead ball line, as players bringing the ball into their own in goal can mean the difference between an attacking 5-meter scrum and a defensive 22-meter dropout. So it's also important to understand the realities of not having assistant referees, and so on deep kicks by attacking teams with a defender near the goal line, referees need to be very vigilant, and as in the video examples, try to find sight lines to see the ball around the goal line, right? Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find any situations most recently of this where referees are on their own having to race to the goal line to make these decisions, but I think it's just important for us to take a line of running that is more conducive to seeing the ball and the goal line with as few players in front of us as possible. Couple of pieces for coaches. So obviously, to be up to speed with these new measures and trial laws, and open dialogue with officials. Ensure that players understand the implications of bringing the ball into their own in goal and how their body position should shift to help themselves and the ref. So they can do that by, on those deep kicks, waiting in the in goal and making it clear for the official at that point. Okay. Furthermore, there's available resources online to help develop proper kicking and receiving techniques. Some of these are available at playsmart.rugbycanada.ca through our national key themes, as well as the core skills document that will have some more kicking examples in there. Right, I want to thank everyone for their time. If you do have any questions, please try to email me at nabdelnoor@rugbycanada.ca as opposed to replying to the webinar invitation, as that goes to Dustin, as we are using his webinar account to conduct this. So if you guys can try and answer to me or ask questions to myself, that would be fantastic. In the meantime, I want to thank you. again, and we will move to a few questions here.